everybody in the audience. I do want to take just a quick moment to welcome Rocky DeWitt. He'll be representing Woodbury County, so we have a new member to our board. We'll go ahead and we'll start. I'm Paul Merton from Buena Vista County.
Scott Jacobs, Calhoun County.
Rocky DeWitt, Woodbury County.
Cecil Bloom, Crawford County.
Neil Bott, Carroll County.
Brent Wilhelm, Sac County.
Sheila Martin, Suwannee Mental Health.
Cody Stewart,
Sam Stoles, Mental Health.
Chris Dan, Chesley Hall.
Jim Prince, Hartford, Woodbury County.
Tina Season Center.
Pat Larson, Howard Center. Gary Porter, Simple Life.
Teresa Yoga, Rolling Hills Coordinator for Woodbury County.
Julie Albright, Rolling Hills Coordinator for Woodbury County.
Lisa Mayer, Coordinator.
Lisa Winkle, Coordinator with Buena Vista Cherokee. Teresa Magnuson, Crossroads.
Louise Napa, Coordinator for Crawford and Canada. Don Menser, CEO of Rolling Hills.
Dennis Butler, Woodbury County.
Mindy Roder, St. Anthony's Hospital, Carroll.
Rick Whitehouse, Recovery Center.
Jonathan McCabe, Opportunities Unlimited. Teacher Brown, Westbrook. Jessica Stable, Westbrook.
Stuart Westbrook.
Leon West.
Gary Larkin, Supervisor, Turkey County.
Ashley Miller, Plains Area Mental Health.
Melissa Drake, Plains Area Mental Health.
Brenda Erickson, Plains Area Mental Health. Lori Bush, Plains Area Mental Health.
Cindy Wiley, Woodbury Plains.
Val Newcomb with Urban Moving Connections, Sioux City.
Rosie Stotts, Regional Social Leader.
Amy Reesberg, Counseling Services.
Dennis Bush, Cherokee County Supervisor.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I know we got a little short on tables and chairs, so we need to make someone to pull another table over. Hope everybody's comfortable. All right. Next up, minutes of the previous meeting, which would have been on January 8th. We actually had a budget work session ahead of that, which we have the minutes from, and then the minutes from the actual meeting. So, Don, do we need to do those separate and approve the minutes from both? Are they all
I
together?
think it could be the same.
So is there a motion to, and these were all sent out electronically a while back, but I would accept a motion if anybody doesn't have any changes to those minutes.
Well, on the last vote, it was said it voted on the original motion. That should be on the motion as amended.
And I got that changed, and
Okay, it wasn't on the change, okay.
I didn't print out the change one because I know we changed it.
Yeah, it's not on the one I have.
Which one was that, Neil? Was it the
The
first
very
or the
last
second?
is being, vote, it says vote on the original motion, and it should say there, vote on motion as amended.
Which page are you on?
I'm on the last page.
Vote on original motion.
That should be on motion as amended.
Yeah, it should be on the motion as amended. Otherwise, this is correct.
Got it. I know I added it, so maybe it's just, I had two copies, and sometimes it will say like the second copy, so.
Okay.
But thank you.
All right. With that change, I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second it, Louise.
Okay, motion, Neil, second from Cecil. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. The agenda, Dawn, anything you want to change there?
And we need to add under new business, Plains Area Mental Health is requesting funds for observed community treatment proposal. And we also need to add a discussion on regional legal counsel.
That'll be under new business as well.
Yes.
C and D.
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? So moved. Okay, thanks, Brent. Thanks, Dennis. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Make sure the recorder's on. This time we accept comments from the public, where everybody has an opportunity to speak. Something that's not agenda related. Is there anybody that would wish to address the board on something that's not on the agenda? Okay, we'll move forward then. 6A, the monthly financial report. Don?
If you want to turn to the financial report in your packet, our beginning cash balance for the region and the counties on January 1st, 2020 was $4,855,061. We received revenues at the county and regional level of $1,621,468.82, primarily the fiscal agent fund. And then expenditures for the region and counties were $2,700,587.88. This was the month that more payments were due. And then an ending cash balance is an aggregate of $3,775,931.55. I printed off all the regional revenues to date so that you can see where we're receiving revenues from the various sources. The hospital ITP reimbursements are at the bottom there, so we've been receiving those on in good pace. Total revenue to date for the fiscal year is $5,186,782, and expenditures to date through the end of January are $4,626,475. Any questions?
Questions from the board? Okay. Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the financial report.
I'll make a motion that we approve the financial report.
Thank you, Cecil. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Brian. I have a motion and a second to accept the financial report as provided. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Okay. Next up is an update on the Sioux River joint funding of the, along with Rolling Hills for funding the assessments.
Our last meeting, we had discussed sending a response back to Sioux Rivers. They were wanting us to increase our funding amount for the assessment center at Sioux City. We're currently at 75-25 split. They wanted us to increase to an 85%, and then Sioux Rivers decreased to a 50% split on the assessment center because of utilization. And we countered that request and asked for an 80-20 split. And they had their board meeting yesterday. They approved our request on the 80-20. I have had a request from Siouxland Mental Health going forward that when we do the contract for next year, that we lock that 80-20 in for a longer term versus year by year, because it is possible, that their utilization may increase or it may decrease. But they need to have stable funding, and we don't know what's going to happen to the region long term with the funding proposals that are at the level of the legislature. So at this point, the only thing you need to consider is the 80-20 split, and then at some point we'll negotiate the terms of the contract when we get closer to the start of the fiscal year.
So fiscal year of
When we do
21.
contracts for next year,
Okay.
for FY21.
yeah, I don't want to get caught in those last month or two before. All right.
I would take action on that,
Okay.
so it's in writing.
So yeah, that was, again, as Don said, they requested an 85-15 and we countered with an 80-20 and they did accept that finally, so. I guess I'd accept a motion if that's still okay with this board to move along with that ratio, then I'd accept a motion to that fact.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so you have a motion to approve?
Accept the 80-20.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion from Cecil and a second from Dennis to accept on our part the 80-20 split. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries as well. I think you said they took formal action.
I believe so. He just sent me a brief email this morning, changed it and said that they approved it.
Next up is the Plains Area Mental Health Center and Suwannee Mental Health Center Mobile Crisis Assessor team up there.
Thank you for standing so we can see you and hear you.
Yeah.
I'll try to speak as loud as I can.
I can kind of speak for Plains, but one of the things I wanted to state that Nikki, myself, and Ashley on Monday attended the first ever Mobile Crisis Summit that was held in Adel. The regional CEOs decided to bring together some of the mobile crisis units. I think there was probably 8 to 10 there at least. There was also Karen Hyatt from DHS and some people from ISAC. It was a very good first meeting to kind of discuss how different mobile crisis units are working. There's actually one that's just going to be starting in July. Some that have been under construction and just starting within the last year, which falls under us, but we're going to continue to have those meetings potentially quarterly and be able to talk to other mobile crisis units to find out, what's going on, what are they having problems with, maybe to help us with some of our problems. So it's a very informative, I think, gathering of information meeting. But I can kind of state from our numbers for the 7 counties that Plains area serves, we've had a total of 22 calls since we started in Norman. The call locations have been in Shaler, Sac City, Rockwell City, Lakeview, Early, Ida Grove, Carroll, Storm Lake, Nemaha, Denison, and Sioux City one time via phone, and that was due to some miscommunication due to a snowstorm. The calls came from law enforcement. We've had at least 10 calls, jails. We've had a couple calls to them. Clinics, we've had a lot more clinics calls. ERs, we've had 2, and we've actually seen an increase in school calls lately. The outcomes, kind of to talk about what happened from the service, we've had 55% stay at home or their location that service was given. We did have 32% that went to the emergency room for inpatient. One of those people, we did not recommend them go to inpatient. We thought we could serve them at the crisis home, but she was bound and determined to go to inpatient. So we did do a warm handoff to the receiving hospital. 14% did come to the crisis home. Average call response time, out of all these calls, we've responded within 28.45 minutes. Average length on scene, we were on scene for at least 55.32 minutes. Some of the suggested referrals were therapy, whether it be to whatever therapy that they wanted, CASA, because we've had a couple domestic abuse situations, and we've also had DHIS services, which we've seen an increase in calls for juveniles. So we're learning a lot about that and increasing our knowledge on services out there. We've had a lot of great feedback. Just had feedback from a medical provider. We've had feedback from the law enforcement. Lisa has a feedback of one that Siouxland Mental Health went on in Marcus, Iowa. So there's been a lot of positive response, and I think we continue to get information out there in our calls. They kind of have decreased the month of February for us, but at one point in time we kept increasing. So it depends upon the situation and the people.
And then from Sioux City's location point of view, very similar to theirs. Most of ours are law enforcement response. We have approximately 40 that we've responded to since the initiation in November, but that is increasing daily. We're seeing a lot more as we're doing our marketing. So we're seeing a lot more calls coming in. And I would say 90% of our calls have come from the Sioux City Police Department alone. We've had about a 66% diversion rate from ER hospitals and arrests. And those that did go to the ER were truly candidates to go to the ER, so that's good. Our dispositions have found, our top dispositions have been that we've just done counsel and referral. The individual's been able to stay at home. Secondary to that, they've come to the assessment center. And thirdly to that is to the ER, and that's for the appropriate reasons. We are finding that we've also had quite a few calls or referrals to the assessment center. So MCAT has referred 5 individuals, and then on top of that, the Sioux City Police Department has just had direct response to the assessment center without MCAT of 6 other individuals. So 11 referrals just from the Sioux City Police Department alone in the calls that we've done with them since we've initiated. So that's great. We're continuing to meet on a monthly basis with the Sioux City Police Department because that's where the majority of our calls are coming from. And we feel that we have a really good relationship with them. We are seeing a little bit more in the outlying counties. Last night we went to our first one in Cherokee, which is great, and I heard that it went fairly well.
DHS said that it was, because it was a DHS caseworker, social worker, CPS that was involved in that, and she commented that whoever responded was amazing and provided them some really good information.
Yeah,
so.
and he came back and said he felt it was a great collaboration with the police department and DHS as well. So those connections are being made. Good news between all the programs. We haven't heard anything really negative coming from the program at all. And we'll just continue to do our marketing and outreach and hopefully continue to expand our programs.
And I can't speak for Nikki, but I think we're getting a lot of, I'm getting emails from like AEA saying, hey, we'd like to meet with you. We heard about this service. And so some of the, we're still working on getting some of the entities involved. There's other people out there talking, saying, hey, this is happening in a school. So that AEA, I think I'm going up to their meeting in Sioux City to present on MCAT within some of the, for the schools in the 7 counties. So we're getting a lot of good feedback from people that they're passing on the information about our service.
So when you're talking AAs, I'm assuming you're talking juveniles.
Those are the juveniles.
So you're not gonna refer those to the crisis center?
No.
I mean, do you have providers lined up, or where do the juveniles?
The juveniles are a very hard one. If you look at our region, we have Jackson and Sioux City, but that's if they're open and they're not full. A lot of times we have been able to maintain them in their home with getting them into services right away the next day. The parent, we create a safety plan with the parent involvement, the child's involvement. Sometimes they do have to go to the ER. We had one that was in a clinic and the doctor called us over there, we did it. The person needed to go to the ER. And so the referral source is very difficult for juveniles, but that's within the whole state. A lot of times it is talking to them and, letting them know that it's okay to be scared, you're not alone. Giving them sometimes the referral information on what services are out there, that there's, say Siouxland Mental Health, or there's counseling services in Sac City. Giving them all that information to move forward. But to find an inpatient setting or that type of crisis, there is not that for the children in our region.
I want to play it dumb because I am dumb. So this service, though, I mean, the mobile crisis service that we're all a part of, are we jumping the gun on the juvenile side, or is that's part of the service? So it's not.
A lot of the providers out there, when they started with, we do all ages. And we also looked at, when we were looking at things, and Nikki and I were meeting with the regional ladies, we were talking about eventually this has to happen. But just to even be able to give the information that, hey, there's this provider in your area, or this is available to you. A lot of families don't know that. Just having that person to come into their home and talk to their child, and then having the follow-up that we do, that they know they can call somebody, or somebody's going to call them. Just giving that little bit of hope to the parents or to the children, I think has been very beneficial. And so I don't think we've jumped the gun. And I mean, just look at how long it took the state of Iowa to develop crisis stabilization homes. I mean, it's going to take time for that for any type of children's service.
And that's where I was getting to. I didn't know if we were, because right now we're just kind of in the adult service and not so much at juvenile. That's why I didn't know if we were.
Well, and we're fully funding at this point, and I would prefer that if we're going to pay the amount of money that we have for these programs, that it's fully utilized. So I would prefer that it's all age groups, because a year from now, it's core for children and adults. So, and one thing I would like to add, by the way, great work, great report out. Very pleased to hear the outcome of what you're expanding across the region. And Siouxland Mental Health just got accredited. They got their deemed status late last week, I want to say, Friday? Thursday or Friday. Yeah, so they are, with that accreditation deemed status, they will be able to bill Medicaid for Medicaid eligibles, and then those revenues will come back to the region once they start receiving those payments. So, and Plains, you are in the process.
In April, they come back. We just sent in our report, and so in April, to come out and do a review, and then hopefully, we have everything in process. Well, and there's a few things with working with the MCOs, but we're hoping to get that within the next, say, 4 to 5 months, at least 3 to 4 months.
Great.
So I hear that report, we had 44 calls out of Siouxland.
Approximately 40 calls, give or take.
Approximately.
Yeah. I've had a few in the last few days that have been added to my data that I didn't want on here, so it's approximately 40-ish calls.
Well, and I think just the wider utilization, people are going to be talking about the service, and eventually you're going to be full-time
Yeah,
all the time.
absolutely, yeah.
I have a question right here. The education department here in Sioux City is going to be going to a therapeutic classroom. I don't know if any of you have heard, but I was wondering if this would be a program that could pair up with that during a situation like that. Has there been any talk about that?
So we are in the process of communicating with the Sioux City schools. I've spoken with Jen Gomez, and then I also met with the community provider team last week as well. And Jen would also like me to meet with the district at a district meeting to include all the principals and such, so we can communicate it in a mass way versus going from school to school to school. Excuse me. And then I'll also be meeting with the resource officers from all the schools as well. So absolutely, yes. The intent is that we be available for the school system in the event that we have a crisis going on.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Mickey or Melissa? Thank you. Okay, we'll move up and RCF community placement update.
I'm going to start off with just a few comments. I touched base this morning, and I wanted to, first of all, bring you back to when Woodbury County was wanting to come on board. And we had already, within our 7 counties, worked very diligently from the start of the region to move people out from congregate care out into the community. When we started as our initial 6th and then 7th county after Cherokee joined, we had about 22, 24 people that were in RCF, and we are down to 1, 2, 3. Anyway, Louise she's the one that still has one long-term complex needs case that's going to probably be there very long-term. But I started talking with Teresa and Patty Erickson at the time when she was at the home, and about coming into Rolling Hills. That is our philosophy, is providing services for people and the communities of their choice. It's our mission, and that we need to adhere to that. And at that time, Teresa I just want to point out, she has worked very, very hard over the last 2 years to meet what I had proposed, which is to greatly reduce those numbers down. So I thought it was just really good for Teresa to give an update to show what has transpired in Woodbury County with those RCF placements. So she puts the numbers together. She's not going to go through the entire thing, but she's going to kind of give you a summary, and then at the end I'm going to wrap up with the cost savings.
So Dawn and I met on September of 2018, and at that time, Woodbury County had 17 individuals in RCFs. And if you go through the individuals, you will see that their longest standing one was there for 21 years. So we had a long history and no movement. So kind of got on that, and we talked about getting them down to 10 prior to moving into Rolling Hills. And I would have, but then we had 3 admissions. So every time I would get somebody out, about 6, then 3 more would go in. And it was, yeah, so we got down to 12, 7-1 of 19 when we joined. And from there, we are currently at 10. But also, I have to say that since we have joined Rolling Hills, we have come up with a 90-day policy. They only get approved for 90 days. There is no additional time period. So the IHHs have worked wonderful with us, and mostly we work with Pride Group, and they have been phenomenal. And so I've only had to place 4 people into the 90 days admissions, and they will all be leaving by next month. So we will have 4 additional RCF admissions since we joined. And by March, at the end of March, we will only have 6 left in the RCFs, starting at 17. And my goal is 3 in the next 6 months, only having 3 left. So we've been working on this for a while.
Yes, so
We're finally seeing progress.
when we projected the budget for this fiscal year, I had decreased that expenditure level from $460,000 that they had in their Woodbury budget with Sioux Rivers, and I dropped that to $300,000. And with the 17 on 9 of 18, that would have cost us $452,965 if she had not achieved the success that she has in moving people out into either have homes or into the community. With the 10 people that are currently in the RCF, and this is just Teresa's, it costs us annually $266,450, and then to get down to 6, it further decreases it to $159,870. So tremendous progress. I mean, and it's not only about the money; it's about assisting people with moving into less restrictive environments in the community with the proper supports. So she's done a great job at fulfilling that, and I just thought it was time for you guys to have an update on that.
And along with the IHHs, is Suma Mental Health and Plains area. They have done a phenomenal job working with the regions. So. Any questions?
So the one of 21 years, that one's been placed?
Nursing home.
Oh, okay.
And there's 2 more you'll see that we're currently actively looking for nursing homes for, and they've been there 9 and 11 years.
Those are hard.
So, yeah. And the 3 that we probably won't be moving on is the site provider at the RCF refuses to let them leave because of their mental health. So we still need to work on that.
Who's the site provider?
Charles Tilley is with the RCF in Lamar's, and then there's 2 with Plains area that he oversees in Pembroke.
So PA is overseeing those backup positions?
They are oversee the Lamar's, the Pride Group.
And Dr.
Who's the
Gillette,
MD?
Dr. Gillette
Dr. Gillette
oversees
is overseeing
Charles, yes. So it's all reviewed by the dean.
Okay, are there any other questions for Teresa? Thank you for that update. Thank you for your work. Okay, children's behavioral health implementation.
Okay, we didn't discuss this at all at our meeting because it's all focused on budget next year. But going back to, for Rocky's benefit as well, we have a large collaborative of children's behavioral health providers that have been meeting since August to complete our draft implementation plan. And this plan is really focused on all of the parameters that we need to put in place to develop our children's system over time. The bill does have some requirements for dates on early identification, prevention services for children, and among other things. And then also, there are some core services that we have to meet at the same time as we have to have core services in place July of 2021 for adults. So the last large collaborative met in December, and actually we met again in February. So we've had 2 meetings since we were together to discuss any update on this. So we have the draft plan. It's not finalized yet. There's a couple of components I need to add in terms of services, but just to go through and kind of briefly highlight what is contained in this so that you're aware of where we're going with the children's system, because this has to be sent to DHS by April 1st of this year, so it will be on the agenda for your approval at the next governance board meeting, which will be hopefully the final product. So we are in the process of forming our Children's Advisory Committee, and we had some work groups that met that were smaller groups off of the Children's Collaborative. They met in November and December, and we mapped out all of the progress towards creating the Children's Advisory Committee, and that is on page 3. And some timelines there. You can see in February the respective bios have to be submitted to the CEO. I was going to provide those to you today, but I don't have them all back yet. I probably have about 60% of the bios for the Children's Advisory Committee, so that when you designate those individuals to that Children's Advisory Committee, you have some background information on those folks. And so on page 4, you can see, I'll go to the top of page 4. In March, you're going to be appointing a representation to the Children's Advisory Committee. I'm also going to be asking for you to consider a mileage stipend for the representatives who are not affiliated with an agency. I think it's a lot to expect a parent of a child or an adult with a disability that they're not affiliated with an agency to pay their own mileage to travel, possibly over an hour to get here. And so I'm going to ask you to consider that and take action in March. I'm going to be working with Jim France on doing some rules of operation so that our advisory committee has some basic operational ground rules for the meetings that will be taking place. And then in May of this year, we're going to organize our first Children's Advisory Committee meeting, and that'll just be kind of a meet and greet, and we'll take care of some organizational things of that one. And then in June, the advisory committee designates the following members to the governance board a children's behavioral health service provider in an ex officio capacity, an AEA administrator, which is a voting member. It doesn't necessarily have to be an AEA administrator, I found out, but we actually have an AEA rep that has agreed to serve. And then a parent of a child who uses services or actively involved relative as a voting member. The other party that's not included in this, because we already have it set up, is that our adult with a disability or an actively involved relative is already appointed to the Region's Advisory Board. The only change in that in our 2080 is that they're going to become voting. So from an 8-member voting board, you're going to increase to an 11 voting member board.
Is that just for juvenile items or for everything on our normal agenda?
It is not separated out, because the adult with a disability or the actively involved relative is a voting member as well. So it's for all. They become a member of the governing board. There are some regions who are pushing back on this a little bit and wanting to take fiscal matters out of the equation for the extra voting members. I think that's a slippery slope. I have reviewed the revised rules, and it is clear to me in rule and in code they are voting members, and there is no exclusion in terms of if it's a fiscal matter or if it's a service matter. But I know there are regions who are going to be challenging that in the 2080s. Because the CEOs, some of the CEOs in the state meetings, well, there are regions that are broke that can't really, move anything forward, but they are, indicating that DHS does not have authority over an intergovernmental agreement, and that we should be able to put the terms and conditions in there that we want. So that's where we're at with that. I don't know if you guys want to have a conversation about that and your thoughts on whether the voting membership should stand, but it's clear in the new rules that they are voting members. Yeah.
At, I think it was January 30th, the ISAC meeting, and some of you were there. They talked about this, and the word slippery slope was not used, but I think it's a very good one. Also, having a 28E agreement is supposed to be a voluntary agreement, and it's also a little bit questionable whether DHS can, tell us how to write a 28E, so that point was also brought up. And there are going to be, as Don said, some regions vote and not have the new members of the governance board be able to vote on financial matters. And I think it's something that this board should consider, even though we may get shot down. I think it's making a good statement. It's certainly representation without any financial investment at all. Whereas us, we're elected officials, we're all, can be giving money. They're not elected officials, and they are telling us how to spend our money. Some heavy discussion about that among our board members, who was all at that January 30th ISAC meeting of the Board of Supervisors, and some of you were there, and I welcome your thoughts as well.
Would that mean that we'd have to amend each individual 2080 agreements to put language in there that in pertaining to financial matters, only elected officials can vote?
We have to redo our 28E anyway with this board, and I think we're just talking about the main 28E between Rolling Hills and the separate boards of supervisors. Don, can you help me out there?
We just have the 28, and yes, you're right, Neil. We do have to amend it anyway to add, and we've already been working on that. This is one thing that I think we're shielded from is because of the size of our board. I don't think you have to worry about an unequal distribution in terms of, you've got some really small regions out there. Right now, Sioux Rivers are sitting with 3. And prior to these new counties that are going to be joining in July, they would be a 50% split on their board. If it's a fiscal matter that the voting board members don't want to fund, but yet those that are not stewards of the funds are voting on, that's where I think you get into more of an issue. But for us, with 8 county supervisors, I think we have a really, for lack of a better word, safe distribution on our board that I don't see that it would be an issue. Although what happened at the board meeting in January, when we used the way to vote for the first time, who knows? But I'm not real concerned about it, honestly. And it's going to be my duty to educate those new board members that will be serving and making decisions prior to them coming onto the board on how our policies work.
I agree that on this board it probably won't be a problem. Personally, I think that I could lean towards making the spending of money only elected officials. However, if we would adopt such language, we are maybe supporting some of the counties where it is an imminent threat. I guess what I'm saying is, if you're one that you really need to maybe look at that due to the smallness of your region, if you have the more regions that maybe adopt that language, you're actually supporting those that really do need it. And I guess I'm not sure that I see, even with the board the size that we have, what's the downside to if we include that in our 2080 language?
This is my concern. It's the code, and it's in Chapter 25 administrative rule. And I think if enough regions are not in compliance with the code, I think it's a smoking gun. I really do. I think it's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Don, have you talked to Senator Cranbreaker, Mike Sexton?
I have not heard from them.
After our legislative meeting.
They were really concerned about it. Maybe we need to.
We brought it up to them, and they said, how did that get in the bill?
Yeah, we did.
They asked, they look at each other and say, did you vote for that? They said, well, it's part of the bill. That was not their intentions. They said they were going to look into that.
Yeah,
See if
and
they
I
could get it changed.
heard nothing.
Okay.
But my question goes back to the 28E is between governmental entities or 8 counties. We're bringing on 3 people that that are not part of a governmental entity. So why, first problem I see is we have 8 counties that our board probably wouldn't go for, and they probably won't sign the 28E. Then what? What if we have 3, 4, 5 board of supervisors that will not sign this 28E? I can't, if our board says we don't want to be a part of it, I can't just sign this 28E on behalf of Buena Vista County. So I think that's where we may run into some issues. Unless I'm making that up, because I don't think
No.
they're gonna.
I think you're right, Paul. I don't think our board at this point would go along with the 28E, having non-elected officials voting. And Don is correct that counties that have fewer members than us are more affected. My question is, how is Polk County affected?
I don't know what their governing board is.
You know,
I don't know how
they have is there a whole board of supervisors, governance board?
Their board of directors.
Oh, they have a board of directors, they've had that for years. So their governing is not actually their board of supervisors for Polk County, it's a board of directors.
So they wouldn't have a 28E.
Different deal there.
Yeah.
Everything is different in Polk County.
Right.
Yeah.
The state of Polk County?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
who's gonna, to me, as part of the 28E, then, those 3 voting new members, they can't sign the 28E because they're not a governmental entity.
Correct.
And nor do they have any skin in the game to vote.
Exactly,
So-
so.
I would say that that's probably not true. If there are people who are using the services or in need of the system, they probably do have a lot of valuable information to bring to the table.
And I'm not saying
And they're
that's-
taxpayers, so.
But they could be ex officio and be part of the, they can sit at the board, it's just that when you're talking about a budget for 8 individual counties that are combined into one, and they're gonna make a decision for our county without being, as Neil said, elected, I have a fundamental problem with that. I do not have a problem having 3 more people on the board, it's just how they're gonna, what that could do to skew our county taxpayer money, so. That's just, I don't know how it'll work out, but I thought we got that message through to our legislators when we had them.
So the final rules, I just got this link. It came out on the 12th. And the rules specifies the governing board shall include the following voting members. 1, at least one board supervisor member from each county. 2, one adult person who utilizes non-home disability services or is an actively involved relative of an adult that utilizes services designated by the advisory committee. 3, members designated by the Children's Behavioral Health Services Advisory Board Committee as follows. 1 member representing the education system in the region, 1 member who's a parent of a child who utilizes Children's Behavioral Health Services or an actively involved relative. And then the second section of that is B, the governing board shall include the following non-voting. So it's specific that they are voting, and it does not, I don't know, maybe we need to, that goes back to another issue that we could, if we had regional legal counsel, we could find out if, be advised on that versus us just making that decision, and maybe we need to look that up.
Don, I've got a question. The turnover as far as the governance board is only by retirement. I mean, we have a very stable board here because we're elected. We're elected to terms. But when we have 3 non-elected people that have voting authority, what kind of a turnover rate do you think we'll have from those volunteers? I guess what I'm getting at is if we have a high turnover rate on those 3 that vote, are they ever going to get fully up to, as far as the financial arena and some of that stuff? I'm not saying that the surface side, but I'm saying more of the financial side. Are they ever going to get fully up to speed and be able to make as far as the financial? The other, yes, I'm sure they can, but I'm a little bit concerned that we could be a victim of some turnover that might affect us. And yes, we have a board right now that they can't sway it, but we also don't know what might come down the pike in later legislation that might increase that number possibly.
I think it's the opposite too. You could get somebody on there that wants to stay on forever and ever and be your guiding light, that needs to move on. So you got to be careful both ways.
Sure,
But I've been wondering if at the ISAC they did attempt to define what actions you take that aren't financial. I mean, that's what you do, is deal with money. So what things could a board delineate as non-financial actions on the business that you do here every
Now,
month?
that's a good point, because even contracts involve money,
There isn't anything in there that's non-financial.
Yeah.
Everything is financial, and so I think that's part of this slippery slope. In my reading of it and trying to help Don write some rules, I don't know how we could write that and be meaningful.
There may be a solution by rewriting the weighted vote. Yes, they're voting members, now it's weighted by population. What weight are we going to give their vote? I'm saying if we give them very little weight, the consequences would be minimal, unless it's supported, So when you talk to legal counsel, ask them what our options are on having a weighted vote. How will that change? And what weight are we required to give them? That may be a solution where we will comply with the law and yet achieve what this board wants to do.
And the only way we'll ever use a weighted vote is in the event of a tie with an 11-member vote, that's not going to come up.
Then we'll certainly have every consideration of every suggestion, that they have, but when we vote, the 3 voting members wouldn't have very much weight.
I can check on that, and I will also follow up, Scott, with Craig Griffith Sexton to see if there's any movement at all on attaching that into a bill.
I know, Don, you said a few of the regions were looking at this, when they kind of said a show of hands, maybe it was the majority of regions, said that they were going to do that. So maybe we can talk to some of the other CEOs and find out. Sound like that's a consensus at the supervisors meeting.
Yeah, I got all those emails. I don't know. I completely understand where you're coming from, but I think if we don't follow the letter of the law, we are joining forces with the other regions, and it's just going to be a gas setup.
I'm going to throw one thing in that works against what I've been arguing for. If the state passes this legislation where they're going to be the major funders as opposed to us, they should have a little more say in our board than what they do now when we're totally funding it with property tax dollars. That's yet to happen, but it could work against what I've argued for.
Yeah.
But I think we need to consider all sides when we make a decision.
Okay.
Well, I want to make a comment on kind of in response to Jim's comment. You can make it to where just the boards of supervisors or the elected officials vote on the final budget, and yet how that budget actually is divided among the various services will be done by that combined board. A lot like what our departments are now in the service areas at the county level. We approve a budget, but we can't really dictate how in the other elected officials' office, how those monies get spent line by line.
And I hate to have you do more again, but in addition to having the legal counsel look at that, why don't you mention this idea of a weighted vote to the other regions, and maybe they've thought of that too and have a better solution yet than what we proposed here.
I want to make sure I'm understanding you, because now I'm hearing that in a different way. So the weighted vote, the way our 2080 reads now, is in the event of a tie. So are you proposing doing a weighted vote on every vote?
No,
And
not
just take out
necessarily, not necessarily. We can request a weighted vote down on any issue, so I would want to have that included. You know, I would think that most things they vote on are not going to be controversial, but if it would get controversial, I would want a weighted vote.
You brought up a good point that I hadn't really thought about wanting to stay on forever. I guess if we're thinking about having to amend our 28E, do we want to impose term limits for these 3 volunteer?
No.
No? Okay.
No. I would say no, because it is a challenge.
Okay.
Getting people from the general public here to a meeting and willing to serve. Even on our advisory board, we had, members that were people using services, or our parent, Pam Haverall, she's been very good about attending in the past. But as far as our consumer representative, I think maybe they came to one meeting and then they don't come back. So I don't see it as being a tremendously big issue for us. And if we put term limits on it, I mean, they have the opportunity every 2 years to go off, and we give them the opportunity. Pam Larson and Pam Haverall have just been willing to serve, and they have continued to stay on in that capacity. So I don't think we need to.
You'd have I think, an illegal agreement, because if you would post it on those 3 directors, why wouldn't that also apply to 8 of you?
Well, we are elected for terms by our each respective counties. Now, I'm going to retire this fall, so you'll get a new guy on this one. I think Neil just said he's going to retire. So I mean, could be termed out, whereas a volunteer doesn't have that criteria.
I mean, you have to treat everybody the same. However you write something like that, I think you have to be across the board.
I guess my question is, if 28Es are agreements between government entities, yes? Are there any other 28Es in the state that have non-elected people included in the 28E? I mean, is this...
There's got 22, right?
22 what?
22 counties.
No. I'm talking about, okay, so everybody that is affected by a 28E, that signs on a 28E, is elected, right?
Yeah.
My question is, how many other 28Es out there in the state, for whatever reason, are including non-elected people? Do those 28Es exist? Is there a 28E that, well, that's something, then why are we getting singled out?
Yeah, so who would
It's
sign?
legislative, it's in the legislation.
Who's going to sign for those?
But
And according to what I've been told, it was to give the childhood advocates a voice at the table.
I'm not arguing with you when you read the law. I understand it the same way you do. But I do think you have a good point. What's the law determining 28E agreements? I think they're working against each other here a little bit.
I'll definitely find out. Gary Jones, who does our HIPAA, he's willing to assist us in some of these questions that we have. So I will shoot an email off to him and get his feedback and forward it on to you. Any other discussion or questions before I go on? Okay, so the Children's Advisory Board will, the new members will become members of the Governance Board on July 1st. So we're starting that next year. Then the next section just outlines who has been agreed to serve on the Children's Advisory Committee. Anybody from, I know Steve, you're here, anybody that's on the Children's Advisory Committee for next year that's agreed to serve, let's stand up, or something to show before. That's the framework we give it out for services. Any other representatives in the room? Thanks, Steve. To address the governance board changes, some of this is just kind of a repeat. These are sections that were required that we had to submit, so I'm not going to changes. A lot of it's kind of a repeat. And then the actual governing board, we had to list who is going to be serving. And then as far as the 2080 agreement amendment, we wanted to wait until we got the final rules, which now we do, to move to the 2080. And we had one of the work groups, we're working on the 2080 agreement language changes. And so we pretty much have that ready to go outside of the previous conversation that we just had. So I will be sending that later this spring for you to, we'll be having all the member county boards of supervisors review and sign that. And then it needs to be filed in June with the Secretary of State's office. As far as regional staff changes, we did not feel that it was necessary to add another coordinator at this time. We're going to try to have the existing coordinators coordinate services as they do for adults with children as well that are in need, because there was no additional funding given to the regions to do this, so we're going to rely on the good staff that we have. On page 8, the management plan changes. There are some specific changes that we need to incorporate in our management plan, and we are going to be looking at making those changes later this fall. That's going to be that WSIP for the children's implementation on our end of things, and we have to, I'm hoping to have the amended policies and procedures to DHS by December at the end of the year before we start working on the following year's budget. Service and budget plan, that is also due to the state on April 1st as a result of the changes to the children's system. There's a whole slew of additional sections that are added into the annual service and budget plan. I have not started working on that. That's my project for next week. We have to come up with financing provisions that we are going to rely upon to invest in all of the services in addition to children's services, while at the same time facing the possible cut to our revenue from the governor's proposal, which is later on the agenda. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenging service and budget plan to put together, and I think the biggest challenge for us is not knowing specifically what these children's services costs are going to be. It has been I have reiterated this more than once with our Children's Collaborative, and I think because it was the message that we sent from the start, is that the regions are not the main funding source for kids, and this is not changing that. Medicaid is still the main funding source for children that need behavioral health services, but it is the region's responsibility to ensure access on all levels to those services, and then also create additional services to be able to meet the core service expectations. But we are not the main funding source. And I think, the collaboratives have been very understanding of that. They've been very willing to be at the table. As we know in the past, we've had great representation from a lot of different disciplines, so it's been really good. And then the other thing that I did not print out, but I sent out the attachment, is that Lisa Bringle, Teresa Yogun, and Matt Oman from Siouxland Investments, Siouxland, I never remember what SHIP stands for, but anyway, he's the executive director of the SHIP in Sioux City, and they put together a resource guide because it was starting to get a little overwhelming in some of our work groups. Everybody, throwing their information our way, so they did a wonderful job of mapping out this resource guide that we are going to attach to the plan, but it really is going to point to demonstrate through our implementation plan to DHS that we have a lot of the services already available across our region. It's a matter of collaborating and coordinating a system that is going to be recognizable. I said this from the start, I don't want this to be, let's put a plan together for the sake of putting this on paper. It needs to be a better coordinated process than the children's system has had in the past. And that's what the regions were tasked with doing. So that will be attached to this. I didn't print it out because it was pretty lengthy, and it's just provider contact information. So.
And it's certainly not a finished document. It's a process, and it's going to be a process for a long time.
Questions?
Don, I have a question. First of all, I know that on looking at regional staff changes and to add additional regional coordinators is contingent upon funding from the state. I want to talk with you on that. As But on the next part, the next sentence, you said that our current people will act as the, in place then. Do they have to have special children's qualifications or not?
Same qualifications as coordinator of disability services for adults.
Okay, that's fine. That question was brought up and I thought I'd bring it up. Very good.
Any other questions?
Okay, we'll move on to new business. Bill 657.
As you know, the governor in her condition of the state address did bring up, which we were all very pleased to hear her say that she would like to seek an ongoing, sustainable, long-term funding source for the region. And with that, her Invest in Iowa proposal that she's been going out to different town hall meetings and presenting across the state just recently includes buyout of the property tax levy that currently funds mental health services across the state. So it does show that at least there is a commitment that when this bill was introduced to follow through with looking at doing things differently. The pendulum is shifting now back to state funding because if you recall, back in 2014 when we started, we had those state funds for 2 years and then they were discontinued and we just had our property tax levies and that's what we've been since. Now it's going kind of the other direction that we are going to be decreased across the state, all the regions, counties within the regions, to $12.50. There are counties across the state who have varying levies currently, anywhere from about $25.54 up to $47.28. There's 2 regions that are $47.28, which was the old per capita max. We are currently at $42.79. And so what this is going to do is the bill that she sent out, and by the way, I gave you the House bill. The sister bill on the Senate side is SSB 3116, which is very similar. There's really no change between the two. So what this is going to do is provide, we have $12.50 per capita that we can levy for property taxes. And then there is going to be a per capita allocation distributed from the $80.1 million that is proposed for the regions. And out of that, it is going to be subject to 15%, up to a 15% penalty, depending on a core service domain review and your compliance with those core services on July 1st of 2021. Currently, we have 3 of the 8 that we have to have in place for adults. We are working towards some other initiatives. Hopefully, we're going to be closer to being in compliance and we won't be as deeply affected. If they were to pull the entire 15% of our distribution based on the chart that was sent out, we would lose $755,800 if they pulled the entire 15% for FY22. Now, to bring you up to this buy-down plan, which is the chart, if you look across there, first of all, I have a problem with this because they didn't use our expenditures for 20, which include Woodbury County. So if you look at this in comparison to our funding versus FY19 expenditures, that looks like we're going to have a whole bunch of money sitting there, and that is skewed data. So we are in the process right now, the CEO Collaborative, of providing updated projections, our 20 re-estimates and our fiscal year 20 ending balance projections. So this is going to look a whole lot different, hopefully, by the time it's pared down. So our max levy of $8.4 million for this year will be reduced down to $2,466,313. And our state distribution of the $80.1 million, we would receive $5,038,673. So our total ongoing funding is $164,227 less than our budget next year. But we're going to be subject to a penalty, which makes absolutely no sense. So if they pull further money away from our region for that distribution, they're just going to thwart all of our efforts on the regional level to Weston services. So I did, right before the meeting started, I received some updated figures from Teresa Armstrong with DHS. I have not had a chance to look at that. We, as a collaborative, met with the governor's office, the chief of staff and deputy chief of staff on February 13th. And I felt like the meeting went overall very well. We had a game plan as a group to really send a message that we were appreciative of the opportunity to be at the table with them, and so that they would listen to what our needs were and how this is going to translate out basically in the real world. And, there's a lot of regions that are going to be, negatively affected by this proposal. However, I appreciate the commitment from the governor in looking at, some ability to assist the regions with this property tax decrease and putting it on either a penny sales tax. But I've also heard that in her plan, there's enough of a surplus in the general fund that if the penny sales tax does not pass, that they could distribute it out of the surplus. But that's one-time funding.
I talked to Steve Holt the other day. He thinks the penny sales tax is dead.
Oh, I never heard that.
In his opinion, I guess.
Sure.
I talked to our senator and our representative on Saturday, and they gave it less than 50% chance of passing. What do you hear?
I have not heard any updates. And I guess at this point, if it doesn't fly and the governor wants to push this forward, it's going to be on surplus funds.
There's a lot in this, in addition to what we have. I mean, it plays with our state income tax and a lot of different, there's a lot of stuff in here besides what we're concerned about, I guess, Ron.
Sure, yeah, because it's all tax. That's a tax bill. Yeah.
So if we use the $80 million, there's really no reason to jump up and down and cheer, because we're going backwards. We're going backwards both in funding, and we're giving up some of the authority that we've written to ourselves in our 2080s.
Yeah, correct.
But you would save a lot in property taxes in Crawford County.
1 year.
Yeah, 1 year. And then what? That's my.
And then you're going to have this, and then you're going to have amount. That was
There
spike
was
to next year.
a lobbyist from the Eastern region who stood up at the end of the meeting, and he indicated that there needs to be a backstop so that if the state funding or there's an economic downturn, if that is decreased and the ability to fund services across the state, that regions have the ability to backfill our levies up to what the needs are within our region if there's a downturn on the state funding. They seem to kind of lock into that concept, but I don't know. If they're, I don't know if that'll go anywhere. And I honestly, I just checked the bills this morning, and they were introduced 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they have not gone. There's no movement.
Well, they got to get out of the funnel by Friday.
No,
It's
not
safe.
financial.
Well, not financial.
It's a tax bill, so it's safe from funnel.
Okay.
So that's where that is at. As always, if things come my way, I will continue to keep you apprised.
What was that originally, almost $1 million shortfall? You said we're gonna be 100 and some thousand?
164,000 from our budget, but yeah. Caught me off guard on that question, what that number was in comparison. Okay, so the 975,000 you're referring to is the difference between the 8.4 million that we're current at the 4279 down to the 30, whatever that number translates to for us.
Well, we weren't gonna reach that 4279 anyway.
We need it to be next year, but
Wouldn't it become
if I had my way, but I'm not the board decision makers, and that I knew that's what we needed to be able to move forward.
I thought you adopted the class so forth. You adopted it.
The 4279?
No,
36.
36.
The recommendation is
Is
38.
that the number you're using then?
We're at 36 next year.
It's actually counting the world. We'd be better off if this was better off.
Okay. Any questions about that? All right.
Okay, next up is the joint core service development.
Just wanted to add in just a thing that we have been coordinating Sioux Rivers, Northwest Iowa Care Connections on service development to be able to meet the regional core needs. I'm going to continue to do that going forward. I know that with the funding being a little up in the air right now, and then with Sioux Rivers requesting a higher percentage on us, I was kind of at one point thinking we could probably, with the smaller percentage that Sioux Rivers is contributing towards the assessment center, that we could just continue financially to develop services on our own. Well, it's not going to happen now, especially with this governor's proposal. So unless you have any other concerns about that, we're going to continue to work with those two other regions. It makes me a little wary just for the fact that they have a lot of shifting going on between their two regions. I heard this week Northwest Iowa Care Connections Governance Board voted to accept the 3 members or 3 counties from CSS. It would be Worth, Winnebago, and Cassup. And now, just yesterday, there was a bill, an amendment to an existing bill that is going to allow, and I don't know if this is specific to county social services or if, because you can interpret it 2 ways, or if it's any region across the state, but it will allow for another region to, counties that are dissatisfied within a region essentially to get together and form another municipal services region, which they just legislatively prohibited that a year or 2 ago in a bill that this is it, 14 regions, there are no additional regions, now we're just going the other way. So,
And it is not specific to Anna.
it is not. You can interpret it both ways. The explanation says a county within a disability services region, but the bill says within county social services.
But it's not, they didn't have to.
It's not happening. So, yeah, so you can interpret it both ways, but I'm glad we're stable here. So,
Maybe not, we'll start arguing about it.
yeah. Oh, we got time on that.
Okay, then we have a request from Plains Area Mental Health Center. Who wants to-
Do you want me to take it?
It's going to be a joint thing here. You can talk about what the service is.
So I'm Lori, I'm the Chief Program Officer. Can you hear me?
No.
Shall I come up?
Probably come up a little closer, Lori. You can talk about soft spoken anyway.
Sorry. So I'm Lori, I'm the Chief Program Officer at Plains Area. Kim Kelleher, the CEO, decided to go be on a beach somewhere this week, so she sent me in her place. So the ACT team, if you guys are familiar with that, it's a community-based treatment program. It is team-based care in the community. It is service delivery to the highest needs, highest risk people that we serve in our counties. The premise is that we have a team of individuals, a psychiatric prescriber, a nurse, a clinician who's trained in both mental health and substance abuse services, a bachelor's level type person in like a social or human services background, and then a peer who has mental health and is in recovery. And the approach is that they are very small teams, about 1 to 10 patient ratio or client ratio, with the idea that the team then can concentrate heavily on the needs of these members. They meet daily to have a conference about the needs of the members and how that they can serve them best. And the people that would be served by this team are those individuals who have very high risk, high need, serious mentally ill, have tried other treatments, but haven't necessarily benefited from the traditional approach, meaning they're no-shows, they have access issues, they just are not accessing services appropriately. And so in such, they are ending up homeless in jail system, that sort of thing. They are reluctant to get services because sometimes the stigma, but also just the access issue, some of that siloed approach to care or case management. I refer someone to psychiatry and there's a wait. Clinical services, there's a wait. There's a disconnect between mental health services, SUD services, those sorts of things. And the idea is that this team-based approach to care would comprise all of those expertise and that they serve one person with that expertise right where they're at, so that you can identify escalation before it happens and prevent some of those things and get some stable support with them in the community where they're at. Yes?
I have a very robust voice. I'm Brenda Erickson, Plains area, I'm the CFO. Attached to the proposal is a budget. What we're requesting is the region help us that first year, get it up and rolling. We're going to start with a small program, hitting Carroll and I got to get my readers on Auburn County. This is a whole year's cost. We really hope to get up to 50 members enrolled with the program. And once we get accredited, approved from Medicaid, we will start getting reimbursement for the program. And our proposal is, as we get reimbursement, we will refund the region similar to what we do with Turning Point. So if right away, if we make money on it, it will no longer be funded by you. Again, this is a program where only Medicaid pays for it. One of the biggest pushes our departments have been doing, our billing department has been doing, and a new program we're looking at outcomes. And we're reaching out to United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and say, see what we're doing. So we're trying to get these type of services pushed to other insurances as well. So it's just not on Medicaid or regions. So it's a wonderful program, it's proven, and it's going to be one of your core services coming soon. So
It is an evidence-based model, it has a fidelity model attached to it, so there's a specific training when the team goes through to provide the service.
Brenda, just one quick question.
yes.
Are the MCOs reimbursing quickly and everything's in line for the teams that are already in place throughout the state?
I do not know about those teams. You know, I did some research. They do have funding for it, and it's a per diem per day, and depending on who the main provider was that day. So I'm pushing numbers like you wouldn't believe to make this self-sustainable. It's getting the number of members into the program we need to make it self-sustainable. And being in rural Iowa, you know, that's why we're keeping it small at first, just to get our hands wrapped around it and how to make it work across the whole region.
So we'll have,
Finances.
that's what I'm asking, how we're gonna have. So.
How soon do you guys make this decision, Brenda?
By the July 1, we know we would like to implement this.
Oh, so we've got a little bit of time.
Yes. If we're going to have it implemented by July 1, we need a little time for recruitment, you know.
Would there be any harm in making a decision on your request on March meeting?
No, that would not be a problem at all.
How much was the request on?
469,000, I think.
469, 7.
You know, Lori and I were talking, and this is not some rough numbers. If we have one patient who receives 5 visits a week for 6 months, that's a possibility of $8,000. I don't know how many visits, are going to happen. It's going to be 1 visit per day. It's new to us. So it just depends on the need of the client. It's 24/7. They call it midnight, our team has to go. So
I had a question about, I know that there's an employment connection early with the ACT. Contract for employment services of $40,000. I was not sure what that was for.
getting them employment services. So that is contracting with, helping with the employment service agencies, Lori.
Like Wesco?
Yes, yes.
So that to me would not need to be part of this proposal because we already pay for services to those agencies directly.
Okay.
So I think that can just be an agreement between the parties versus being a $40,000 request for region. That can just be billed. What they do as part of that treatment team could be worked out in contracts with those providers.
Okay, I jotted that down. We're going to talk about a direct contract. And the $40,000 for professional training, that is tech assistance from the University of Iowa. They have a very robust, good program down there. So.
I would like to go back and run the numbers with Ms. Cotter. If you recall that core services allocated amount in our budget this year for additional core services, it was $922,648, which is the same figure for next year. In CSN it shows I have a zero expense, but that's inaccurate because that was the mobile crisis proposals got approved, and so our mobile crisis, we only had 100,000, but between both programs it was more like 450,000. So I want to just run the numbers to make sure where we can land if we approve this. And so you're saying this is a 1-year request for this amount for the first year?
Yes. And again, if we get reimbursement, and we'll know in 3 months, that reimbursement rate.
Oh, the reimbursement rate is so low for ACT.
But if you keep your caseload low too, that's a problem. I mean, it's finding the people out there that are really self-sustaining if you get the right amount of members. But then you might have to spread yourself really thin.
So we'll wait, March, we'll
Big decision March.
Okay, any other questions for Clayton or anything on that? If not, we'll get down to item B under new business, legal counsel.
Has a situation that I had emailed for about an RCF case where we had authorized 3 months of funding, specifically 3 months. The client had habilitation, Medicaid funding for habilitation services. He was coming out of a hospital setting, needed to go. He was stabilized as far as he was going to be. He was referred to an RCF, and because he had the HAB funding, it was issued on the NOD that it would only be for 3 months, no funding extensions granted. When that 3 months ended, the facility administrator or whoever's in charge of handling those things at the facility level did not realize that the funding had expired, and within 6 weeks or so, they started becoming aware of it, thanks to Lisa, who was bringing this to their attention, and at the IHH level as well, because that whole 3 months, the expectation was going to be that they were going to be seeking community-based habilitation services for this individual to move through after 3 months. That did not happen. This facility has sent several emails to Lisa and I that have been challenging that, threatened legal counsel on the region. I had emailed the board, got some feedback, I would say of the board members that responded, about a 50-50 response in terms of just go ahead and settle the bill, negotiate, or don't pay it at all, stick to policy. So I decided, because we had gone down such a far path, and that there is no legal requirement because RCF is non-core, that I was going to just leave it as the NOD stood. Well, I was contacted last week by legal counsel for the facility and with some questions about why Rolling Hills would not be paying this and have we made exceptions in other cases. And I did not, the only response I gave was that I have to push this up to the level of council and that they would be hearing from him. So I sent it off to Paul Allen, who's the Beatty County attorney, because he's advised me on other matters. Because this involves a client case, and this client is not from Buena Vista, he felt it was out of his jurisdiction to respond to this, and that we are getting into a very gray area in terms of the regional process, because we have our 2080, but when you get into a matter like this, who's going to represent it? And I know at one time I was asked, I think Brett, you had asked me the question, why would, I think it was you, maybe not, about legal counsel for the region, why wouldn't we have legal counsel? We've never needed it, but obviously this is a matter that I would prefer to have someone assist us with. So then I ended up sending some particulars of the case to Gary Jones. He said he was more than willing to take a look at it and give me his opinion. If they pursue litigation, though, I don't know that Gary would be willing to represent us in court at this point. We haven't gone down that road. And again, I haven't heard anything back from him. So I think it just warrants a conversation about what we're going to do. In legal matters such as this, we've been fortunate all along. Roger Saylor from Crawford County has been willing to provide us some legal counsel. Paul Allen has been very good, but when we get into a specific client case, it's really a gray area and who's supposed to represent. His recommendation was an attorney in the Crawford County area. I did put a call into the Crawford County attorney. He's new, Colin Johnson. I have not heard back from him. Gary's going to give me his opinion, but I would like to have a conversation with Colin as well. So looking for us to have a discussion about how we're going to proceed with that going forward, because this is the first time this has come up. In my mind, the facility did not follow our plan, which is clear that it's 3 months, and any exception to policy or an appeal needs to be done within the time frames outlined in our plan. That did not happen. I do not feel that we are responsible for any further payment. I don't want them to turn around and bill the individual or his payee, which is mother, because it's a bill of approximately $15,000. So I'm waiting to see what Gary's thoughts are going to be. But do you have any suggestions on what we do? Do we want to work with Gary, who lives in Waterloo, or someone closer here?
One thing, Don, we just appointed Colin county attorney here in January, so we do not have an assistant county attorney yet. Colin's plate is very full because he's doing the work of 2 attorneys, and he's also, he's been in the office 7 years, but there is a difference between being the assistant and the county. So I guess I would maybe put a lot of hope in getting even if he responds to you, I'm not sure how deeply he'll get into it.
Sure.
Don, do we have ICAP insurance?
Yes.
Why don't you contact ICAP Legal Access? You get 5 hours of free legal advice. They can be an expert in whatever field you need.
That's a good idea.
Somehow I don't know that for the counties. We're using that quite a bit.
What's the dollar amount we're looking at?
Probably about 16,000. I don't know what the latest was. And because we have been adhering to our management plan that's approved by the commission of the state, I would hate at this juncture to turn around and say, we'll pay it, or we'll pay 50% of it to avoid litigation, unless I'm advised to do that by the board or an attorney, because it would be setting a huge precedent going forward. That our NODs mean nothing, and that you can push your way into getting those paid. It's a big concern for me. And actually, it's interesting because when we had our CEO meeting earlier this month, a couple of the CEOs say, well, I hope that this ends up in court, or you get an attorney that shuts it down and says that RCF is not core, you don't have to pay the bill, you're not liable. He said, because we want that opinion across the state. So. What's that?
Maybe they'll not pay the legal fees.
Yeah. Well, and just a side note too, I had meant to mention this during the discussion on the governor's proposal that I found very interesting, is that the core services amount, or the amount that we would receive in state funding on the governor's proposal, it was clearly indicated by the governor's staff that that state distribution can only be spent on core, not non-core. The only thing we would have flexibility to pay for non-core services on would be our $12.50.
So I guess what we need to look at, again, we're talking with the county attorney as well. He got his opinion from the AGs, and that's where we're coming up with the gray area with the county attorney. And then again, there's BVs, but the resident or the client isn't a resident of BV County. The provider's not in BV County, so he's a little reluctant to kind of just step in that. Yeah. Now, again, I think our policy says if we don't use the county attorney, now I don't know how this would go with the region. We still have to invite or ask him to get, if we can go out and get other, hire outside legal counsel. That's just in our county. I don't know if we have that same, for this board, again, we've been relying on Roger and Paul, or Dave Patton prior to that a little bit, so.
Roger's a judge now. And several years ago, back in legal settlement days, we almost got stuck with somebody at Glenwood Resource Center because they obtained a guardian from Crawford County who didn't even know the person, and the guardian did not know that by her taking him on, because it was prior to his 18th birthday, that Crawford County would gain him. And our county attorney at the time flubbed it up, and we outsourced it to Rick Frank, who Roger Saber was just taking his bar exam at the time. So Roger actually took that case and we won it. So Rick Frank might be a good person. He knows a lot about all that stuff. Not that we have legal settlement anymore, but it was residency was the basis of the issue. But they kept him as board of the state rather than putting him on property. That's how we got to know Roger.
But I think and we're just new to the ICAP piece of it, but we found out that if there is some pending litigation, they want to know about it now, yesterday, instead of waiting that out. So it would probably be in our best interest to contact them at this point.
I'm hopeful that the attorneys can work this out,
Okay.
and we don't get dragged to court over it.
But we do need to have a plan.
What's that?
We need to have a plan. I mean, if it's.
Don, didn't you say originally that the providers, their lawyer contacted you and said, have you ever made any exceptions to that or something like that? And that's kind of what he was getting at, I think, this leading question. If you actually do pay it this time, then another lawyer from some other place can ask you the same thing. Why'd you pay that one? And say just as well.
Exceptions to policy happen.
Right.
Look at Louise's guy that's been in there for years. But this guy he had a little bit different circumstance because he had a funding source. He could have had 100% of his services paid for through the HAP program. Now, had he not been habilitation eligible for an alternate placement that provided 24-hour care, then we probably could have made an exception to extend 3 months like we do in most cases, every 3 months. But yeah, it kind of begs the question, if we get down to the point we can't fund non-core, then that goes. I mean, that's the hard conversations that are happening at the state level is that there's a huge huge amount of non-core being funded across the state. And the governor's office is looking at region fund balances, the amount we're paying out in non-core, and they have an issue with it. And it's also, some of the legislators are having a big issue with non-core. So,
I also find fault with the IHH. Wasn't any of
Not-
ours.
No.
But I find fault with the IHH that was also involved as far as no movement on the case. But- And also the med provider.
What do we risk if we do nothing? They may not decide to bring suit. And if they do, then I guess we look at it, then we know we need an attorney.
yeah.
Well, the provider,
I'm planning to just kind of wait to hear back from Gary after he has the chance to review the case. And based on his response, I think at that point, we need to look at what our next steps are. But Gary's pretty astute, especially when it comes to, he's our HIPAA compliance guy, but he knows mental health services across the state in Iowa. He's very up on things. So I think he will, be able to interpret the right thing for us to do very easily.
well, you'll keep us
I will.
involved on this. Okay, any other business that needs to come before the board? If not, we'll look to schedule our next meeting, March 25th.
I have a conflict that day. I mean, you can move it if you want.
Well, and I do too. I'll be gone the 25th. So I know that.
The day that would work the best for me would be the 11th. That would be the second Wednesday in March.
2 weeks. I don't know that I would have.
I mean, we can still, we'll have a forum.
Well, we won't have the children's plan ready to go because their meeting, the group is meeting on the 19th, so it was going to be that following week that I was going to have to approve it.
Unless, could we maybe go the last Monday in March? Because
Yeah.
I'm tied up the 25th as well.
Yep, I could do the 23rd.
So what day?
31st.
30th?
30th.
Oh, the 30th, okay, yep.
Still at 2:30? Yeah.
That's fine with me.
Does that work for you, Paul?
Well, I'll be back, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be out of state.
I'm going to be
That
out of the
week.
country. But
Okay. Depends how far south we go. And then Monday
3:30,
we'll-
March 30th? Or 2:30, yeah, March 30th. Scott, do we have, we're accommodating your schedule because your meeting's on Wednesday.
He can't.
That Monday, I can't make Monday at 2:30.
At all.
I gotta be back in the city by 4.
Can we do it earlier then? Well, Neil's got a board meeting Monday morning.
I've at the morning, if it's 2:30 in the afternoon, I can make it.
But 2:30 won't work for you, Scott, will it? How about 1 o'clock?
Monday, so sometimes that might open up things that normally happen, but don't happen.
That's true.
1 o'clock, I just gotta leave by about 2:30.
Would 1 work for you? Can you get,
Probably.
and 1 will work for you?
Should, I just gotta be gone by 2:30.
Okay.
1 o'clock?
On the 30th.
Okay.
Okay, so is there a motion then to set the meeting for March 30th at 1 o'clock? And we'll just-
I'll make that motion, Paul.
Okay, second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion to adjourn. I'll move. Is there a second?
Second.
Well, let's get Rocky. Rocky.
I'm officially here.
Yeah. You gotta be quick. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.
Shut this off?
Yep.